I've talked before about prep work and how important I think prep work is. Let me get up here for a minute. And how important that I think the prep work is. But it's sometimes trying to decide what prep work needs to be done. And hey, Regina. And a lot of times with the chalky style paints, they're like, oh, you know, prep work needed. Just go straight to your piece. You don't need to do prep work. And sometimes that's the truth. And sometimes that's a big pile of malarkey, which in this instance is a big pile of malarkey. Right now this thing is just piled up with everything that I'm thinking about using. I like to have all of my supplies and everything ready, because that's the thing about paint, and especially with this chalky style paint, is you can't put on a coat that maybe you're going to wet distress or something like that later, and then take off and go looking for your next color and come back and have it be ready, because it's going to be partially dry by that time, and your window of doing the creative thing, say a blending technique or something that you wanted to do, is going to be closed. Let me go ahead and show you the colors that I'm going to use. That's the purple that I'm now not going to use. This is Crazy Eyes, which is kind of a bright, almost matches the shirt I have on, a bright orangey, melony, peachy kind of a color. I mean, this thing's going to be loud and proud. It looks more orange. There you go. It's sort of a corally orange, but very, very bright and bold. That's going to be one of our main colors, as is Berry Dance. Oh goodness, this is so pretty. I'm just going to hold the lid up there. This is called Berry Dance, which is like a sort of a Laffy Taffy magenta, if you ask me, if y'all are old enough to remember Laffy Taffy. Gosh, I love that stuff. So that's going to be the other color we're going to use. And what I know I brought home with me that I can't find in here this morning is by Dixie Belle, has a metallic, they have a line of metallics, but the one that I'm going to use is metallic copper. And I'm going to do the legs, like from here down, in the copper. And somewhere along in here, the edge of the top and coming down, I'll decide that as that's my not planned part. I have a little bit of a vision in my mind, but it will come down with this, which is their copper patina. And here you can get a green or a blue. I chose the blue spray. This actually has pieces of copper in it that you paint on. Then you paint a second coat on. While that's still wet, you spray on the patina. I don't know if you can see this tiny, tiny bit of picture right here. That's sort of what a patina looks like. That's going to be on here, and I believe that using the blue color and the copper will blend in with that teal enough to bring it down over those bold colors enough to calm them down to where they're not shocking, yet let it be a beautiful statement piece. And then with the copper legs, that'll tie it all back in together. And I haven't decided at this point. This is what the doors look like. It definitely needs repairing, because I didn't pull this door off just for this benefit. But I had considered, and still may, I don't know yet, putting like a raised stencil on here. Well, I mean, this has a decorative front, and I can leave this alone. And I've got to figure out what in the world I'll do, whether I need to fill in all these crevices first, if I'm going to put a big decorative piece on here, or whether to go with, like we did for the desk that was the February class, and make a big sort of applique out of like an IOD mold to go on here. Then you still got to worry about making it look good with these background crevices. All this hardware is coming off. It's not bad hardware, but it has nothing to do with, you know, looking like an old piece or a crazy piece. So I'll pull this off. I have a little container here where I chunk old and new hardware. I have a drawer full of this at work and a couple of these containers here at home. So this hardware can be used on another piece later, but it's not going to be used on this piece. I don't believe it goes with it at all. If I find something that I like the shape of, but it's not the right color, since this is gonna have the patinaed copper and the shiny copper on it, it definitely needs to be copper hardware. So a lot of times at this point, the style now is to paint the hardware, and we would do that if this was shaped in a fashion that would look good. So that's sort of trying to think if there's anything else. And I have my brushes in here. Because I tote them back and forth. I've got a bag full of like my Dixie Belle brushes and my Paint Pixie brushes. So now the plan is I'm gonna sand and look for any area, like right here is some loose paint. Take all of this hardware off, including these hinges, which we'll probably reuse, but they need to be off for right now so that I can get a good coat of paint on there. I'm still terribly disturbed that they painted the inside of these, because that means I have to paint the inside of these too. So that's extra work, but I'm gonna do it. And so I'm gonna sand it, clean it with this TSP, scrub it down, and then wipe that off with a clean rag, let it dry, and start with the painting process, which is gonna start for me today with the DIY Old 57, and then and I also have a white here. This is just one that I had open from Dixie Belle drop cloth, and that's in case I decide to do any highlighting later on with some of these colors. I can just mix a little bit of that color in with the white and do highlighting in some areas if I decide to. So I did want to have that out here and ready as well. I have the big top out here, which is by DIY. Once I put all that DIY teal all over it, I'm going to have to top coat it. So I'm just going to top coat it with the big top. And then I'll come on with all of my other colors. And then at the very end, I'm going to come back with the Dixie Belle Gator Hide, because that's the toughest of the top coats that I have, and at least do this top portion with it. I'll probably do all the rest of it with Banana Peel by Junk Monkey, because it's a matte color, and I want it to sort of be subdued, because if using those bright colors, it's going to have to be subdued somewhere to not look comical. So I'll use the Junk Monkey Banana Peel matte finish for that. But the Gator Hide on top, and that's another trick too, if you're using the Gator Hide on top to get that tough, Gator Hide finish, you can still go back over that with a matte top coat later to mattify the look so you don't have anything shiny. But I don't know, with what I have in mind, whether and Gator Hide's more of a satin, whether that'll still look good, and that'll be a decision that has to be made right at the very end. And I have my drop cloth on the floor. If you don't see that, I don't want to ruin my floor. The piece is already on rollers. So I just wanted to come in for a minute and just say, yes, I do believe you need to do prep work even with chalky style paint in a lot of instances, and this is because of this chipping. And because of the chipping, I know that they used a latex paint under here, so I for sure know that I need to prep it. And once I start sanding, I'm going to see sort of how much damage there is, and if I need to prime, I'll prime it. I'll prime the piece too. To begin the prep work on this buffet, a couple of things that I've done already is take the hardware off, and always remember to put the screws back in the hardware to keep up with it later. And I keep one of these little cups to the side, and if you have more than one project going, you can write the name of the project on here. I have the hinges. Normally you can't put the screws back in with the hinges, so I'm going to have this here, but I am not using this same hardware on this project later, but we may reuse these hinges. But I may paint them with the copper. I don't know, but we're going to save it all in here so we have it all together in the end until we're done with the project. Up here I have now TSP, some sanding sponges, because I just saw that there's some flaking and chipping on the paint that's on here already. Somebody painted this before I owned it. They painted it obviously with the latex paint because it wouldn't be chipping off like that if it was chalky based paint. I've got some sponges from the dollar store. This is a little painting bucket that I use for a lot of things. It's a perfect size for mixing your TSP. This is trisodium phosphate. You could also use Dixie Belle's White Lightning, which is essentially the same thing. This is the one I have with me here at home. So it's the one I'm going to use. And it takes about a tablespoon. And I'm measuring. I'm a pretty good measurer, so if you wanted to get yourself a tablespoon and measure this, you could. And I got some really warm water in this cup. I took the doors off and the hardware off, looked inside these. Normally, you wouldn't have to worry about doing the inside, but the inside has, I'm guessing that they sprayed it somehow. But you can see some of the residue of the overspray, and it's dirty in there. There's a bunch of hair and things. The lady who owned this owned a hair salon, so that's probably where it came from. And the tops of these drawers here, this is rough, so I'm going to want to sand that. Not going to, keep y'all here forever with the sanding, but this is where I'm going to decide whether or not I have to use a primer on this after we get done. Normally, you wouldn't have to use a primer if you were going to put on a chalky style paint, which we are. But if it's chipping like this underneath, that's going to chip through later and make it look like, the paint that you went to all that trouble to put on is what's chipping off, because it will be. Then it will be because of lack of prep work. If you wanted to sand all the way back down to the wood, you could use a random orbital sander or a little mouse sander or whatever you had. You definitely could use any of that. There's a little bit of a rough surface here on the front and around these edges. Now with the TSP, which is the reason I have the glove on. It's good to have a glove on. You can use your scrubby, this rough one or the soft one, or a sponge. I don't want to wet these sanding things, so I'm going to move them down. And we're going to start with the sponge and see if that's going to be good enough for us. TSP is like a detergent. May leave a TSP residue, so since this is something that's going to remove excess paint particles and dirt and dust and grime and grease and things like that, you don't want to leave it on your surface without rinsing it off. Come back with a damp cloth and rinse that back off. This is some pretty plain stuff that we're going to be working on today, except I'm going to try to roll some of the DIY Old 57 on the top of this. I've never rolled a clay-based paint because it's very thick. What I've done so far, this is my old paint bucket, is I poured some water in there. See how there's water coming out of that? I poured a little bit of water in there, probably a quarter of a cup, and I've tried to soak it up into this roller so that when I pour the paint in there, it's going to thin it out some so that it'll roll better. I have my misting bottle because I always mist the surface before I paint it with a clay-based paint. I have that says wax on it. I have my Paint Pixie number 12 brush, which is a thick one that holds a lot of paint. And I have a Paint Pixie French tip. And that's what I'm going to use to get like in the crevices of the design back here and inside the insets on the drawers and things like that. I asked my husband to go get me some new copper, and this is what was on it. This is what he bought, and it's not what I want, but I'm going to have it on there. I'm going to have hinges on there. Hopefully I'll find something at Lowe's. If not, I'll temporarily put those on there because the doors do need to be in place for the next part, and take them back off and switch out the hinges after, which will save me a lot of trouble anyways in the long run from not, trying not to paint them. And this is a roller cleaner and a scraper. I'm just using that to open my can. I have a cup of water right here for dipping my brush in. And let's see if this is gonna work. I'm not pouring a whole lot in there. I don't want a whole lot of brush strokes on this top because that parts of it I'm going to want to be smooth. Second to that is a lot of this, because this is a base coat and most of this is going to be covered by the decorative colors that are going to show on here in the end. Let me show you how thin that is. Probably thinner than it needs to be. Can you see it kind of sloshing in there? It's definitely thinner than it needs to be. I'm going to try to stir that in with this roller a little bit. And it'll probably take more than one coat, but that's, I had no way of gauging that. I don't want to waste too much paint, and I just want to get a coat of this on without any brush strokes. And because there are quite a lot of flat surfaces on here, it's going to save me a lot of time doing the sides and the doors and all that with this base coat. Right now I'm just going back and forth a little bit to sort of mix up that new thick paint with the thin paint that I had up there already. And we're just going for getting the coat of the teal on there because we're going to have another coat of it anyway on the top. And it's just a base coat for everything else. And luckily I stopped and put my drop cloth on the floor because I have a feeling there might be a drip or two with this thin paint. The doors leaning down here so they won't be in my way during the interior process. Oh look, this does go in those crevices very good. I may not have to use as much of brush as I thought I was going to. Over the areas where some of the teal will show in the end, which is going to be the very top, maybe a little bit on the sides, and possibly a little bit in the center of these doors and drawers, they will definitely get a second coat of this old 57. As textured as this roller is leaving it, I may have to consider doing that with the brush. Another lesson learned. But since I'm wanting it to look a little bit like a patina, this may be to our advantage. This I'll come back over with the brush, but since the pile is so deep on this roller, I'm actually able to get in there for this first coat pretty good. Basically, I'm not even going to need my brushes. This is how I'm going to continue. And this is what I'm going to do for today is I'll probably do the back legs and the rail that's in the very bottom. Back you up a little so you can see that. There's a rail that goes across the bottom, kind of across there. I'm going to do that. I am not going to do the front decorative legs because they're going to be copper, but I'm going to finish getting, well, I will have to use the brush. Let me just show you this. I'll use the French round for this in here and just job that up in all those crevices. This brush is so perfect for that. And the same thing, these little areas here, the roller did not go in between those. So we're gonna get those and get up in all those crevices. I just dipped it right down in my little roller bucket. And that's getting the first coat on there. That's gonna be probably copper in the end as well. But for right now it's gonna, or probably a copper patina. It's gonna start out with the old 57. So that's it for today.